Having had the pleasure of working with you and your firm for 4 or 5 years now, we've seen you evolve.
I like to think of us as sort of a bigger law firm, but we maintain a boutique type of feel. You have to always be mindful and looking out for new opportunities, especially if you want to have a bigger firm, a successful firm, and one that's going to potentially continue to grow.
For those of you watching, this is what you want to hang on to. Welcome back to the Jon Marc Podcast. I'm John Robinson.
Mark Ryu.
We're here today with a very good friend and one of the best lawyers running one of the best law firms in Chicago, Mike Bonamarte.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Mike runs Levin Perconti, which is you probably will do a better job describing it than I do. I call it catastrophic injury and medical malpractice.
Yeah, I think that's fair. 25 lawyers, just a really great group of people that I've been working with for over 20 years now.
Your firm has a very interesting history. And for those of you that don't know, because we walk by and you don't have your name on the building, right? So here we are downtown. We ate at RPM Seafood last night. We're across the street, did not even realize. And here we are now in the offices, and your office is beautiful. This is one of the most tech-forward firms that unless you get to walk through these doors and see it, you really don't know that this is happening here.
As a person who came from high tech, this is very reminiscent of a SaaS company's office, not the traditional law firm's office that we go visit.
Well, I think that I am very appreciative that you noticed that. We were on the 4th floor of the same building. We had about 10,000 square feet. We were growing at the time. We've continued to grow, and we were sort of just running out of space for everybody. So this space, which is the floor below, became open, and there was not a single wall, single office. It was just a blank, empty space. And we were able to design it with the contractors, the architects. The only slight regret is we signed a 10-year lease in January of 2020 and moved in. And then the world shut down, but I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. And obviously we've been back in full time since. And it's just a great space, great location right on the river.
In one sentence, can you describe the Levin Perconti law firm?
You can take 2 sentences if you need.
I would think the best way to describe us is that we've become compartmentalized over the year, but we've maintained collegiality in the last 20 years. We've grown as a firm, but we thrive on that environment where it's an open door policy. We're constantly talking with each other. And I think that's what it takes to be successful as a trial firm. That was about 4 sentences, but it's hard for me to do that when I've been here for so long.
Having had the pleasure of working with you and your firm for about 4 or 5 years now, we've seen you evolve. When there is breaking news, I'll get a text from Mike and he'll say, hey, what can we do about this? Or you guys will find some new niche and we'll have a collaborative conversation about how do we go and figure out how to get these types of cases. Having buy-in from the top on being forward thinking as a law firm seems to be, from the outside looking in, extremely important. How do those things materialize after we get off the phone and have a conversation, say, hey, this is how we're going to go after this? How does that work its way down to the rest of the firm?
Yeah, it starts, we talk to you. Obviously, the marketing, especially in the Chicago area, is really competitive. But I think wherever you are, whatever type of firm you are, if you're going to get into a new practice area or if you're going to jump on a breaking story that could result in litigation, you have to make sure that you have the infrastructure set in place to handle that, to handle those types of cases, whatever those cases are, because we have to keep in mind, we're representing one client with one story, and we have a lot of cases. I don't like to think of us as a high volume firm because we have and are always willing to dedicate the appropriate number of staff that is sufficient in number, training, supervision, to handle each of those cases with the care and attention that they need. I like like to think of us as sort of a bigger law firm, but we maintain a boutique type of feel.
Question for you on that too. So it's very interesting. Like you say, you're in a very competitive market in Chicago, and a lot of these breaking news cases seem to come across your doorstep pretty often. You guys get your hands on them in a market where you're not the biggest player, you're not the biggest spender. How does that keep happening?
Well, number one, I'm curious. So I'm trying to always pay attention. That's something I've learned from Steve Levin. You have to always be mindful and looking out for new opportunities, especially if you want to have a bigger firm, a successful firm, and one that's going to potentially continue to grow. And you just have to really think and read and just try to have whatever knowledge base that you need to handle these types of cases, and just always be willing to explore other opportunities.
What has the growth trajectory looked like post-COVID for you guys over the past 5 years and the distribution of different case types?
So I would say around the time of COVID, especially, in the last 3 to 5 years, historically, we've always handled nursing home abuse and neglect cases. We've always handled medical malpractice cases. And for reasons that have nothing to do with the underlying substantive merits of a nursing home abuse and neglect case, we've had to, unfortunately, be a little bit more selective. I mean, we've seen a lot of big nursing home chains in Illinois, and frankly, some of these chains have facilities across the country. They've gone out of business. They've sold their licenses. They've declared for bankruptcy. They're not maintaining sufficient liability insurance coverage. And it's really, really unfortunate, especially here in Illinois. We have a great set of laws that are meant to actually encourage nursing home residents to act like private attorney generals and bring litigation. But they're sort of rendered meaningless when a nursing home or the corporation that operates it does not have the financial means or viability to pay those claims. And as you probably know and have experienced, trial lawyers often have to regulate big industries. We've seen it historically in tobacco, cars, all that kind of thing. Pharmaceuticals, right. So while we still have a very active nursing home practice, I've tried to do things outside of our cases. A few years ago, I wrote a letter to about 100 state representatives and legislators, elder advocacy groups, just sort of highlighting the significance of the problem and explaining to them. And many of them called and said, I'm really surprised that there are no laws that require a nursing home to maintain any minimum insurance coverage. So, I get some traction in that regard, and we've seen some new players that thankfully are bringing sufficient insurance coverage to the table. So we're still actively prosecuting those cases, but because of that shift, we've explored some other areas. We've had a really robust birth injury practice that's kind of developed over the last 4 to 5 years. We are handling a significant number of SILA cases that are referred to as group home abuse cases. And I guess a common thread, if you're just thinking of those 3 case types, nursing home, SILAs, birth injury cases, is that at the heart of it is we're representing a really vulnerable population, whether it's a baby that's still in the womb, a developmentally disabled person that's living in a group home or a state developmental center, or obviously a nursing home resident who has certain medical conditions. They've lived a long, healthy life often, and the one time that they rely on somebody else for some help, they're betrayed, basically. And a lot of the times it's not because of a bad staff member or bad caregivers. You do see some extreme examples, but a lot of times it's because a corporation is running the facility and they're not devoting enough staff. They're not devoting enough resources, training, supervision of those staff. And, the common theme is they're putting profits over people. Because when you cut the most necessary resource, staff, people suffer. It's human greed over human need, profits over people. Those are the types of themes that you see, especially in the abuse and neglect cases in nursing homes and group homes.
That brings up some good questions I had around staff. So, for example, you mentioned that if you're going to take care of your clients, you want to make sure you have the proper staff to adequately serve their needs, right?
Yeah.
So you had a very thriving nursing home abuse practice, but you still do. But those cases are getting less and less due to all the reasons you listed. What is your thought process as a leader of the firm of where to properly use your existing staff to find those different niches to go into or case types to go after?
Yeah, so when I mentioned we're compartmentalized, but we maintain collegiality, I'm trying to think about, as are my partners, Steve and Jon and Margaret, we're all trying to think about ways to make our staff, whether that's lawyers or staff members, as efficient as possible to give the client the best experience. So, for example, we have an intake or case acquisition department that's staffed with 4 to 5 different paralegals. One of our partners has a hybrid role, and she litigates some cases, but she also oversees that department. One of the staff members in that department, her whole job is to get medical records. I have another staff member in that department that guides the client from the time that the intake comes in and we make the decision to sign the case up. His job is to keep the client informed while we're investigating the case. Just give that client updates because, again, we have a large number of cases, but for each of the clients, it's typically that's their only case. And we have to always keep that in mind. We have 2 lawyers that just process settlements. They do everything from lien resolution to all of the paperwork that's required because sometimes that's a case within a case, especially if you're dealing with a wrongful death case. They have 2 staff members. We've trained different lawyers to handle different types of cases. During COVID, back to one of your earlier points, before COVID, we had actually worked with a couple of lawyers, nationally known lawyers in the field of birth injury litigation. And when we worked with them on a couple of cases, we kind of thought to ourselves, maybe we should explore a partnership.
Were those cases that you guys originated and then referred out originally?
Yeah, we talked to them a little bit about the cases. We ended up cutting a deal with them to bring them in on a couple of cases. Then we thought, bigger picture, maybe there's something we could do. So we actually formed a new partnership during COVID in November of 2020. We made Dov Apfel and Seth Cardelli. Dov has been prosecuting birth injury cases for 40 plus years. His son-in-law, Seth, they were at the same firm together. We formed a partnership with them, and it's been, wildly successful. I mean, now we're prosecuting 80 cases in combination of cases that are filed and cases that we're investigating, and we're doing it all over the country. I mean, I've tried 4 birth injury cases in the last 4 or 5 years, and I had maybe worked on one before. All of those Seth has been on, and all of them have been big 8-figure results, including a record outside of Cook County for any med-mal case in Illinois history.
Incredible. Yeah. This, for those of you watching, this is what you want to hang on to, right? The growth story, the diversification, instead of folding or retracting when you face headwinds, right? You look for areas of opportunity. It's interesting what you did with Seth and Dov in birth injury because you very well could have kept going down the road that you were going on before you wound up partnering with them, right? This build versus buy mentality. You could have built it and it would have been organic, but you went out and you said, this is an area that we see opportunity. We have a way to generate these cases because you guys have such a strong digital presence. And then you said, hey, we're going to form a partnership. We're going to move forward with some of the best attorneys in this specific area of practice to help bolster your team.
Yeah, and I think I think we hired 5 lawyers in 2020 and 2021. But it comes back to one of my earlier points. If we're going to really make a push to get these cases, we wanted to have the infrastructure set up so that we can make the decisions about whether there's a case. And if we decide to prosecute the case, we have, 2 of the most, they probably have more medical legal knowledge in this field than any other people in the country. Both have been chairs of the AAJ Birth Injury Litigation Group. And it's been really, really exciting. But, you always have to maintain with the clients, from the client's perspective, or think about it from their perspective. Is the consumer making the right choice because they're going with the firm that actually has and is willing to devote the necessary money and other resources to prosecute the cases? As you know, these are highly complex medical cases. Oftentimes we're getting experts in about 8 to 10 different medical disciplines. That's another thing that Seth and Dov have brought to the table. They know experts all over the country. So we're making really, really well-informed decisions from the get-go, whether to investigate, whether to prosecute the case, and then if so, we have the best experts in the country to support the case going forward.
I think it's really smart what you guys did. It's interesting too, because you use your existing staff base and expertise to service that new client base. But the cases you guys are servicing are very long cases.
Right.
So it's not like you're going from auto accidents into birth injury.
Yeah.
You have the infrastructure in place to handle a relationship with a client for 3, 4, 5, some of these birth injury
10
cases
years?
can be 10 years long.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are not quite that long. We have had some outliers that have gone beyond 5 years. But yeah, in certain areas of practice, you're definitely playing the long game. It's not a soft tissue auto case that's going to get resolved with maybe a dep or two, maybe a pre-suit settlement demand. These are cases that you're going to have to invest not only in the right staff to handle the cases, but they're very expensive to prosecute the cases when you're getting all of
It's an
these
investment.
experts. Right. I mean, we're talking cases that go to trial, we may be investing $300,000 to $500,000 on those cases. And so there's obviously some risk there that you've got to be willing to take.
How do you manage that, deciding what you're going to take on? Or, these are big swings you're taking with these cases. You take over big bets instead of hitting a ton of singles.
Right.
You're going to be looking for a lot more home runs, a lot more triples. What is that? I don't want to use a baseball analogy, but how do you manage that in your thought process of managing cash flow, capital, but when to decide to take these big swings?
Yeah, I mean, in the jurisdiction obviously factors into it. I mean, we're going to unfortunately have to look at jurisdictions where there's no caps on damages. So the upside on a case has to be there. It's got to be probably in the mid 7 figures. We cannot take every single case that comes through the door, but we certainly want to be able to give the client the appropriate experience where even if we're not going to be able to take the case, they know that we've given it careful consideration. And maybe we're able to give them some answers so that they can move on whether we take the case or not. The nature of this practice is you're going to be handling more catastrophic injury cases that do have big upside, but you're going to have some patience and be willing to take on some risk, especially if you're going to maximize the result of a case. You've got to be taking cases with the mindset that you may have to try it. And really, that's with any medical malpractice case. That's sort of a common thread. If you're taking cases in the plaintiff's personal injury world, to really maximize the value, the other side's got to be knowing that you're willing to try the case. If you're not, then you're probably going to have to take less than a settlement, and that's just not in the client's best interest. Once you start trying cases, you increase the value of your other inventory.
As you focused on taking more of these birth injury cases, there are still, as you said, a subset of these that you're just not willing to take a risk on. How do you avoid those clients of yours who you have to communicate that to not speaking highly of the firm after the fact, right? Whether it's reviews or just word of mouth.
It is a very sensitive issue.
It's tough. I mean, there's certain things that just because of, and I don't blame the people for being upset when we have to tell them we can't take their case, but I think having an efficient process, keeping them well informed and really explaining what we are doing or what we reviewed, how we came to a certain decision. Sometimes there's procedural hurdles, like maybe it's beyond the statute of limitation. Maybe they call us from a jurisdiction where, there's a cap on the non-economic damages, and the economic damages may not be significant enough to justify spending that type of money. But the best you can really do in this regard is just be respectful of them, make them feel, and this has got to be truthful, that you gave it careful consideration, and just try to show a little bit of empathy, obviously some authority. There is a reason why we're coming to this decision. And that's really the best I think that you can do in that regard. But if you write them off, if you just send them a letter without talking to them and explaining, you're just setting yourself up for bad reviews and just, a negative overall experience.
We have so many clients who come to us saying, what do? I got a bad review. And at scale, they try and attempt these review removal services, which are expensive. They operate in a very gray space, but really the answer is, first off, avoid the bad review in the first place, right? Treat them right from the beginning. And if someone leaves you a bad review, you contact them if they actually were a client and you had to let them go. Just explain the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that experience with you, John.
Yeah.
And, that's been the approach we've taken. I've asked you about, should we look at getting some review service to have them removed? You've appropriately guided me through that decision-making process, and we decided not to do it. And I've responded to some of them. And I don't know if it changed the reviews or not, but I've talked to some of them, and at least I've left with a feeling that, at least they now understand what went behind the decision in the first place. And some of them you we can't change
Of course.
them all, and you just got to do more in that regard because we all know that they're important to increase the number of positive reviews. But it's a tough thing to have to deal with because you're going to have to deal with it.
I wouldn't consider, I don't think you would either, consider the nursing home abuse practice area as a dying litigation in any regard. But we know what the issues are with private equity and coming in and really making it much more about dollars than it is about serving the people who need the help. While not exactly a parallel, in other markets, there are similar headwinds that are being faced, whether it's in asbestos and mesothelioma litigation, where you have just a smaller number of people every year getting a diagnosis, or we went through this in Florida where there was tort reform.
And Georgia
As well. Tort reform, which has a much broader impact for your traditional personal injury lawyer. When faced with something that is an external factor out of your control, what is the appropriate response as someone who leads a large organization with a lot of moving pieces?
Speak out about it. I mean, the example I gave earlier, I don't know if the letter I sent is going to bring about any change, but it's bringing some awareness to the problem, because I think in listening to the question, one of the things you said about the asbestos is that you have lesser people being diagnosed with it. The horrible thing about the area of nursing home abuse and neglect that we're dealing with is it's not that people aren't being neglected and abused. We are having to turn down cases because the nursing home's gone out of business, which that is the type of situation where you would hope would raise some awareness with people that might have the power to bring about some sort of change, whether it's a change in the law, whether it's a change in how it's decided that a corporation gets a nursing home license. But you got to talk about it. I mean, I think it's one of our jobs, not as trial lawyers, not just to prosecute cases, but you're trying to bring about change in different industries. And if you don't speak up about it, then you're guaranteeing that you're not going to do anything about it. Nothing's going to change. From a strictly business perspective, it's exploring new business opportunities, new partnerships, new areas of litigation, but always being mindful about whether or not you've got the right people in place to handle those cases. I think that's kind of the best we can do. And then just more globally, support the people that are running for office that you think are going to advocate for victims of corporate malfeasance or medical malpractice, abuse, neglect, and that are going to be a voice for those consumers when it comes time to talk about things like tort reform. I mean, it's a very competitive market in Illinois, but we've got also a huge network of lawyers that are doing things both in Illinois and nationally to try to stop tort reform from happening in our state and nationally. It's something we all have to be concerned with all the time.
So preparation, advocacy.
I think the advocacy piece is something that is not done enough in the
Right.
industry. There are some players that are outspoken, but if you look at when things are coming through, you don't see a ton of people actually trying to make substantial change in their markets, in their region, and wherever they are to make, like in nursing home. Like I recently had my grandmother in a nursing home facility. It was a nice one. And the standard of care there was poor
Right.
for a nice nursing home. So it's like, I can't imagine if you have a loved one going to a like not well-run one, the issues that come up. And with a huge aging population, if you don't advocate for the industry to change, there's about to be a huge amount of people's family members that might be negatively impacted over the next 10, 20 years.
Sure. I mean, you just reminded me of a couple of things. One is I get that question a lot. What nursing home should I? And honestly, I mean, someone called me in the last couple of months and I said, look, I'm going to give you a recommendation, but it's more deductive reasoning. Like I'll look at the nursing homes in this particular area where you're looking, and I'll tell you the ones that I haven't had a lot of experience with, and usually that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate. I mean, and the other thing I do is, it's been a little while, but there's an advocacy group that meets at a library sometimes on Saturday or Sunday mornings, and I was asked to participate and talk to these people. And once in a while they may call me with a case, but I don't really care. I'm not doing it for that. It's truly to try to educate family members with loved ones in a nursing home about what they can do to select a nursing home and what they can do when their loved one is in a nursing home to try to mitigate the likelihood of something bad happening. So I'll talk about the resident care plan conferences and each step of the process that needs to happen in a nursing home, how you can be involved in that process. Because honestly, for someone who's thinking about putting someone in a nursing home, a loved one in a nursing home, and it's not like you're actively thinking about it. Oftentimes it becomes necessary because
Unfortunate
of medical,
reality,
right?
yeah.
But people feel guilty about it, and I try to tell them you can't feel guilty about it. There are situations where you're just not equipped to care for somebody on your own without professional help. That's what they're supposed to be there for. But that trust often gets betrayed. So I try to talk to people about, every time someone goes in a nursing home, there is a process that has to happen and you should be involved in it. There has to be an assessment, a care plan, communication of the care plan, implementation of the care plan, reassess, and then the process starts again. You try new things. And boy, that sounds pretty basic, right? But it doesn't happen. And that's why we have these cases, because there's a breakdown in some step of the process, often multiple steps, and it leads to unfortunate things happening, and it's still happening all the time.
Your practice areas wouldn't traditionally lend themselves to an abundance of use of technology or forward thinking, right? You look at a case, it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years to develop. There's a lot of manual research. However, since the advent of AI, not that long ago, you have been very, very active. You just told me this morning, hey, we just signed a contract with Supio. We're going to start using Supio. You guys have used Litify for years. What are some of the ways in the day-to-day operations of the firm that you guys are using technology that someone may not traditionally think is happening here?
Oh boy, it's one of my favorite topics. I think it was around, I just tried a case in Coles County in March of 23. It was that spring where ChatGPT really started to become a little bit more mainstream. And I jumped on it. I started talking about it at lawyer meetings. And it took a little, I guess from the lawyer's perspective, I was intentionally repeating myself because I knew it was going to take a little time before people started to buy into it. I mean, it got to the point where I just would walk into someone's office, say, hi, what are you working on? And then try to think of a way they could do it faster. The first example was at the lawyer meeting after I started exploring with it. We meet every Monday as a group, the lawyers, and we just talk about different issues that are going on, whether it's in the courthouse. We strategize about cases. We evaluate cases. And I had taken the train this particular Monday. I'm walking to the train station, and I recalled one of the cases that was presented at the lawyer meeting. And on my way to the train station, I prompted ChatGPT, and I said, create a settlement demand. That sounds basic now, but at the time, it was like, wow. So it does it, and then I show it to the lawyer that presented the case, and honestly, you've got to obviously edit. We've all heard the horror stories. Don't cite cases from it. It'll hallucinate the cases and things like that. But it was unbelievable. And I've just been a everyday user, basically, of ChatGPT, both professionally and in my personal life, frankly, all the time. I just think from a idea gathering makes us so much more efficient. It's like having basically a genius to brainstorm with. And now so I think of it in two ways. I think I've probably told you, John, for the last couple of years, I really would like basically ChatGPT, but that operates with or analyzes our firm's proprietary data. And I demoed a lot of different products. We landed on Supio recently, entered into a contract with them. And it's not perfect, but it should make all of us significantly more efficient in its every step of the process, from the intake process to it answers discovery, it writes discovery, it suggests discovery, it analyzes medical bills and liens. So that's kind of more I'll call it the task-oriented use of an AI platform. And then there's also a part of it similar to what I use ChatGPT a lot for. There's just like the brainstorming. Give me ideas for the deposition. Here are the anticipated defenses in a case. Can you give me some suggestions as to how I can refute those defenses? Which we should be able to do as plaintiffs lawyers because we get to select our cases. It's different than an insurance defense lawyer. They don't have that luxury. So every single defense that you hear in a plaintiff's PI case, there should be some logical fallacy within that defense that you should be able to refute. But the plaintiff's lawyers that are most successful spend a lot of time on that part of the preparation if you're getting ready for a dep. There's the knowing the facts, which is obviously important. But what I've experienced, and I may be digressing into a different topic that's somewhat related, is plaintiff's lawyers don't always spend the appropriate amount of time brainstorming, role-playing. What am I going to do if this nurse or this doctor says this? Like, how am I going to refute that? And we have a tendency to get a little too scripted, but I have these case files within ChatGPT now where I haven't disclosed, any medically sensitive information, but I've given it the basic facts of the case, the medical issues, and I have like 60, 70-page outlines that just keep getting updated depending on which medical discipline I'm going to be deposing next. And it's like I have a buddy, basically, that I'm talking to and preparing with.
It's interesting. I haven't heard a lot of lawyers talk about using AI creatively for brainstorming. Everyone thinks of it as like, hey, in the legal space, it's like document generation, research, case law. But it's like, honestly, that's how I use it. It's like, hey, I want to figure out something. I have a thread. I'm going to put it in there, and then ChatGPT is going to help me pull that thread to get to where I want to go and use it creatively. I think that's super interesting. I even a lot of times I'll be like, I want to do something with AI. I ask ChatGPT, I want to do this with AI. How do I do it? And then it tells me, and then I go do it. But it's an underutilized thing for preparation. I think it's just genius.
We were one of the birth injury cases that settled the night before closing argument, but my partner was going to do the damages part of it. And for a long time, I think I'm not alone in this, but plaintiff's lawyers can struggle a little bit when trying to convey that the intangibles, the things like pain and suffering, are actually more valuable than the economic damages in a case, like the medical bills. The medical bills and those types of economics, a lot of times we think are easier for the jury to hold on to because it's concrete. We could put a number on it. It's backed up, to the
there's
penny
a bill
date.
here. Yeah.
But I truly believe that it's the non-economics that are more valuable. So I put this concept into this birth injury case, and I'll give you one example. What it came up with, literally, I got goosebumps because it said it more succinctly than I've ever thought about it in my life. It was something like reimbursing the plaintiff or providing for medical expenses may provide a wheelchair or the necessary physical therapy, but it'll never replace the feeling that the child would have had of dancing on her own 2 feet. And it did this with every single injury to the point where I was just blown away. I was almost upset we settled the case because I wanted to hear and see the jury's reaction to this. It was unreal. But I think in the early days, it's still the early days, obviously.
In the early day 2 years ago.
In the early days 2 years ago. But one of the things that I, coming back to this more bigger concept that we're talking about is, embracing technology is, I think, of critical importance if you really want to have a successful firm. It's not going away.
Not at all.
And I think the firms that get ahead of it are going to be really successful. But what I was worried about, I think like other people, is AI, is it going to stifle curiosity or deep thought? And what I have found, it's the most curious, it's the most creative people are the ones that are actually getting the most use out of these different softwares like ChatGPT, like Supio. I mean, the prompts that you just keep thinking of new things all the time. Like one of the basic ones that I've asked is, I'll talk it to ChatGPT about a case. I'll say, this sounds so simple. Is there any other information that you would need from me about the facts of the case to give me a better analysis? And it comes up with stuff. But it's just a topic that I get really excited about, that some of my lawyers probably get sick of me talking about, but I'm not going to stop because I think it's really, really important, and it's just going to make us better and better. I think you owe it to the clients to utilize whatever resources, whether that's a community or a listserv of trial lawyers, or it's AI, or it's Lex, whatever it is, you've got to take advantage of what's out there.
Yeah, you can either use it as a crutch or use it as like a springboard for innovation to just move faster and be better.
Right, exactly. And I think we're doing that. So yeah, it's exciting.
I think so. I think Levin Perconti is definitely a law firm that other law firms should look to as how they should be running their operation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And, you know, one of the reasons why is that I think we're always looking to improve, whether it's as substantively as trial lawyers. I still watch really great trial lawyers give talks. I read their books. I'm trying to learn management. I mean, that's a new role for me in the last, 5, 6 years or so. And I just want to keep getting better. And I think that's what happens when you've chosen a profession that you really like, that it's kind of fun to continue to learn and get better and better at whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah. How do you appropriately balance those responsibilities between people and actually being like the main manager of the firm, litigating cases yourself and working with the trial attorneys, and then also being at the forefront of technology and marketing?
Yeah, and also making sure the firm's making money and can pay its bills.
Yeah, I am getting better and better at figuring out what data I need to, and a lot of this is based on conversations you and I have had and working together, figuring out what data I should be tracking. Frankly, I learn a lot when I talk to some of the bigger marketing firms that I know maybe not handling the cases, but refer them to us, learning what they're looking at. I sort of will adopt that type of model, trusting that the people that are handling more of the day-to-day litigation, the discovery and things like that, giving them the authority, the autonomy to do that kind of stuff, but always making sure they realize that we don't expect them to do it alone. I mean, that's why we meet every Monday. I have a simple Google sheet that actually I created during COVID when we weren't in the office as much, where it's just easier for them to just quickly sign up. So I'll look at my calendar every week and I'll block off time for the lawyers to meet with me. But for some reason, it's just easier than sending a calendar invite. I don't know why through Outlook, but it's easier. All they have to do is put their name and they know that I monitor that and that I'll either be in my office or we're going to have a Zoom. But it's just trying to promote a culture of positivity. I have very little tolerance for negativity. We don't do everything perfectly all the time, but I expect everyone in the firm to respect each other and have positive attitudes. I think that's really, really important because I think sometimes there's stress, but it's really pressure. You may feel stressed because it's a high pressure type of area. I mean, I've felt it. I'm getting ready to give a closing argument on a big case. I realize I'm feeling a little bit of pressure, but you got to just remind yourself, draw from past experiences that you can handle it and that we're here for each other. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, my role has evolved a little bit over the last 10 years where I still am active in litigating, bigger cases. I'm always going to try to jump on big trials, things like that, but I'm also heavily invested in terms of my time spent looking for new areas of business, improving upon the areas that we've historically handling, and putting ourselves out there. Because if you're going to do that, I think we are a appropriate choice for the consumer. Because you think about it, like a digital consumer, somebody sees a TV ad. I mean, there's tons of lawyers that are saying we've recovered hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. And what does that really mean to the consumer? So we do that, obviously, because of the competitiveness of the marketplace, but behind the scenes, we're trying to set ourselves up so that they have that boutique firm, so that they want to feel that they're almost entering into a contract for life because of how we've treated them. We're never going to be top of mind necessarily, even after we've handled the case, but if someone says to you, like, I need a good dentist, you may say, you might want to try my person, or you're going to say, you got to go to my guy. I want our current and former clients to feel if they get asked that question from a family member, a friend, someone in their circle, they say, you've got to call Levin Perconti. This is how they treated me. This is what they did for me. That's our goal, basically, is to make them feel like we guided them through a very traumatic, emotional time. They either underwent some sort of catastrophic injury, they lost a loved one, and they turned to us to basically be their voice. And we treated them in a way that they trusted us, they respected us, and they'd recommend us to anyone that needed someone like us in the future.
Yeah, what I see from the outside looking in are two things that you don't see at a lot of firms. One is incredible transparency throughout the organization, right? You have no fear at all to just give me a call and say, hey, Jon, what is going on with this? And we'll have a conversation about it. we'll do it on a call with the team too. And you see that behavior become permeating throughout the organization. The other is the one you just touched on, which is you're still litigating cases. You are hands-on dealing with some of the marketing stuff. You are testing out AI. Steve Levin is over here in the other room doing a deposition.
Right.
Right? Like, you guys are in the trenches with your team. And I think that encourages a level of respect that you guys are not just saying, hey, you do this, this is my idea, and you go and execute it. You're fighting along with them. So it's very commendable. As I said, you guys run a great operation. Very much appreciate you sitting down with Mark and I today for this conversation.
Thanks for having us here in your beautiful office. This is fantastic. I had a great time.
I'm glad you guys are in Chicago when some of the best weather we've had all year. I really appreciate and respect what you guys are doing, and I'm honored and humbled to be a part of it. You guys have had some really top guests in the early stages of the podcast. I would encourage people to watch because you guys have had some great names and really successful trial lawyers all across the country. I think it's a great idea.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
You're fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate it.